Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where today it's about this, the Ferrari F40. We're here with my friend 458 Destroyer in his awesome garage to talk about one of the most iconic Ferraris of all time, one of the greatest Ferraris of all time, in a car that a couple of years ago you could pick up for sub $1 million. In fact, only 10 years ago, it was probably less than $500,000. Nowadays, one of these will set you back 2 million, 2.5 million, a great example, maybe 3 million. The market is off like a rocket for these things, and we're going to take it out to talk about why that is. Now, we're here in 458 Destroyer's garage, the JDM cars all over that away, some of the crazy tuning projects right here, and then the line of the Ferraris as well, starting with the Rosso Fuoco 599 GTO, we've got the SF90 Spider, we've got the 458 Speciale, LaFerrari 488 Challenge, 812 GTS, and of course, the subject of today's video, an original US delivered F40. There were only just over 200 of them, but with its 2.9 litre twin turbocharged V8, manual gearbox, ridiculous performance back in the late 80s when they were introduced, it's become a complete legend. And I've driven or been lucky enough to drive F40s on a number of occasions before, but never on roads quite like today. We're going to be heading out to make the most of this and to truly enjoy 458 Destroyer's Ferrari F40. Let's talk F40s. A quick introduction, because I am itching to get this out onto some roads. And I drove around here with the LaFerrari a couple of years ago, and my word, it's going to be fun. So, Ferrari F40, the second of Ferrari's supercars, you could say, hypercars by modern standards, with the 288 GTO, its predecessor that really started it, then the F40 in the late 80s, the F50, the Enzo, most recently the LaFerrari, and the upcoming codenamed F250, which will be Ferrari's next generation hypercar. But the F40 for so many people is the go-to, is their favourite of all of the cars. And I've often spoken that for me, it's more the F50. That was my generation. My first poster car was a Ferrari F50. The V12 is more my thing than the twin-turbo V8, the roof coming off. But this is a car that, like I say, has appreciated in value so much in recent years. Genuinely, around 2010, you'd have paid $400,000 for one of these. About 2 years ago, $1 million. And now it genuinely would be around $3 million for a near-perfect example of this car that's so distinctly 1980s. That wedge shape, this massive spoiler across the back, everything about the design screams unique, screams F40. There's nothing else quite like it. Ferrari actually made from 1987 to 1992 a total of 1,315 cars. And this is one of the quite interesting things, in my opinion, that's led to the rise in values, particularly here in the United States, is that originally only just over 200 of these were delivered in America, about 213, I believe it is. And that, if you think about it, compared to most supercar demand of about 35% of these things coming to the US, is actually really very low, meaning a lot of cars now that they're 25 years old can be imported. So this is an original US spec example. That means you have the black that runs across the back. It actually has a touch more power from the 2.9 litre twin turbo V8, a touch more. It's up from 478 in the European cars to 484 in this. That's 471 brake horsepower, 477 brake horsepower. So we're talking 6 brake horsepower extra. It's not a lot. Around the front, you've got a different lip, that black lip that you can see down towards the bottom, but there are so many design features that stand out. Pop-up headlights, for example, the knacker ducts that you see everywhere, which is to do with the airflow management, accelerating the airflow through the car. Back here, for example, everywhere, these very aggressive flat-sided shapes that you have again, knacker ducts over the rear deck, this spoiler that runs across the full width behind the glass or plexiglass that you can see through here towards that engine. A wonderful view. This is a car that is so incredibly stripped out in every way. Now, you might have noticed also it's running on some HRE wheels, not the original wheels, but finished in the satin black to give it almost a bit of JDM look, fitting with 458 Destroyer's collection. Then inside the car, check out this thing. Carbon Kevlar tub, completely stripped out, basically just the cloth interior and nothing that you don't need. This was a car that was all about performance. Ferrari made the F40 to go 200 miles an hour, to be the fastest thing. Ferrari has always been synonymous with motorsport, with Formula One, with world champions. And this is a car that I think in so many ways identified with that. And one of the funny things is that the F50 that came a few years after actually wasn't really any faster than this. And that's one of the things that hampered it, even though they only made 349 of them in total. And they had originally only intended to make, I believe, 400 of these, but the demand was so high, that's why they went on to make over 1,000 at the end of the day. This particular car actually looks really cool with the red, the distinct Rosso Corsa where you can see the weave through it, the darkened glass and the black wheels. But we should probably go grab the keys, get this started, because it's got a straight pipe exhaust, get out onto the roads, and believe me, this is going to be fun. I can't wait. Let's do it. This is it then, the Ferrari F40 in all its glory on some incredible roads here in Tennessee. What a place to be driving as we go over the crest there, and what a car to be driving in. I tell you what though, I need to get used to this again. It's not an easy car to drive. To shift, to pull away, to hill start, it is a bit of a challenge, and part of that is due to the very unusual throttle pedal. Now, it's kind of like it's off or it's on, and I remember this from the times I've been lucky to drive F40s before, but if you've never driven one, you don't have the same level of modulation that you normally do when you're driving a very high-powered car. It feels really difficult to balance it correctly. Now, this is absolutely up there. I mean, just look at this scenery we're driving through. This is not my first time at the wheel of an F40. In fact, I drove my friend Sam's blue one a year or so ago. Prior to that, I'd driven another friend's just outside of London, and also Greg B's in Italy, amongst a couple of others. But I tell you what, it is an experience, and that's one of the reasons that makes this car so special. Look at this, and listen to this. Absolutely monumental. I'm taking it easy while I'm still learning and getting used to the shift. The pops, bangs and cracks and crazy sounds that are happening behind me are just... Listen to this. Just listen to this and look at the place where we're driving. And that turbo noise there, hearing it swooshing in as we go through the undulations. This is so cool. This is so phenomenal to drive a car like this, to drive it in a little bit more anger, to drop it down through the gears and then to get back on the power when the turbos come in. What an experience. So, the topic of the video, let's talk about what's happening with these. Obviously age is a big thing, but so many people who would have had posters of their F40s on their wall when they were younger are now in a position to be able to afford them. And when I say so many, I mean relative to supply. It's always a supply and demand thing. And we're seeing it as well with cars like the Carrera GTs, for example, all picking up at the same time, because this is a new era, certainly led by technology companies, by Bitcoin, by crazy things happening out there in the world. But cars like the F40 are absolutely in that sweet spot. And I tell you what, it's quite the sweet spot. It's a very different drive here right now to driving in the F50. It's such a different car to experience, but it's phenomenal. And that's part of it as well, let's be real. The fact that this car could do 200 miles per hour in the late 1980s, you've got to get used to things like the dogleg gearbox. First gear is actually down to the left, so that kind of thing, if you're not entirely familiar with it, just takes a second to get your head around. But when the road opens up, oh wow, look at the scenery as well. Look at the trees this time of year, fall or autumn as we would say. Piloting a Ferrari F40 down the road, slightly being dragged around by the camber, and very aware that the rear end is significantly wider than the front, and that I don't necessarily have the best view in the world. There is air conditioning in here. We've got the air conditioning controls. Oh, a little bit low there to the ground. But outside of that, windy windows, no sound system. You want music in here, you bring a Bluetooth speaker with you. This is so phenomenal. I mean, look at this, driving down roads like this in a Ferrari F40, thanks to 458 Destroyer. with that soundtrack. To be driving this on nearly empty roads like today, I mean, I don't really know what to say about it. The seating position is certainly a funny one, and you can change it. For me, the seats, which are actually quite small and snug to begin with as it happens, quite narrow seats, mean that my arms are kind of stretched out to the steering wheel, whereas my knees are right up towards the dashboard. I'm sure you can adjust these kind of things if you're fortunate enough to own one of these cars to your own size and fit. But the sounds and the pops and the noises and the crackles, and if you were driving it in the dark, the person behind you would be watching some little flames popping out the back. As I mentioned, we've got the windy windows, so we'll pop those down for a second, get a bit more cold air in here, but also simultaneously probably hear a little bit more of the cracks. In fact, let's drop it down to second gear. Second gear. Oh, a ton more of the turbo noise. The swooshes, that was cool. All of the backfire. That swoosh is just unreal. What a cool sound. That's actually really cool. How you get that on liftoff. Let me slow it down again. Third gear. Actually, we need to go a little bit slower because of not wanting to go too quick right now. Second gear. And just endless pops and bangs. What a feeling. It actually rides pretty well over some of these bumpier parts of the tarmac as well. A little bit worried about the risk of beaching out under the middle of the car though, with the drop off towards the right hand side of the tarmac there. I'm realising quite how silly this gets in second gear. Listen to this. Full on gunfire behind us. Oh, the noises are just mega. I don't think I've ever really driven an F40 in anger, and I feel a little bit more familiar with the car and perhaps less daunted by it than I have done in the past. This is so... Make sure I get the shifter into the right place. Obviously you've got the gated shifter, but again, the dog leg, just a little bit of getting used to it to know exactly what you're doing. So go around tighter corner, get ready to open it up again in second gear. Must have felt like the absolute boss driving one of these in the late 1980s, this being a 1991 car. The US cars were actually towards the end of the F40 production. I'm actually loving this more than I've ever previously felt towards the F40. Don't get me wrong, I'm still an F50 guy at the end of the day, but to enjoy these kind of roads in here, there's a whole new dimension to it. Just me at the wheel of the car, the open road, unobstructed, minimum traffic. This is everything you want. This is absolutely everything that you want to enjoy a car like this, to enjoy the drive, to enjoy the experience. I hope that comes across as loud and awesome on the video as it is for me in the car. Just all sorts of cool turbo and V8 noises, complemented by the bangs and the gunshots going off behind. The previous F40 that I drove, and I'm sorry it's so loud in here, was the fairly famous F40 Blue that belonged to a very good friend of mine, Sam Moores, that he had owned for a while. He bought the car on 20-something thousand kilometers, had actually had it repainted into the same color as his Porsche 997.2 GT3 RS, Aqua Blue. That had been used for a while, enjoyed. It got up to about 30,000 kilometers when a year ago or so, he actually put it up for sale on the Market. Now, the Market is the online auction platform owned by the fairly famous auction house Bonhams. It had sold for just a touch over £1 million. I think it was £1,008,000, something like that, which at the time would be about $1.25 million, and that's a year ago. The same car was actually re-auctioned by the fairly well-known collector that bought it only very recently on collecting cars, and it actually reached, get this, £2.2 million. At the moment, about $2.5 million. It was actually a no sale, which is really odd, because that means it didn't hit the reserve. But if the reserve was above that, it's a bit odd, because that would actually have been a record UK price for an F40, which, considering that particular car had been repainted, it had done 30,000 kilometers, it's not really the kind of car you would think would be a record price setting car, but still, the point is the same. For that car to auction at $2.5 million, a small buyer's fee on collecting cars as opposed to your traditional auction houses where it's 15% or something like that, it tells you where these things are going. And like I said, it's the age group demographic now able to buy something like this, being in the position to do so with so few of them available, and so many collectors obviously keeping a hold of these cars, keeping on to them for good reason, because it does that. Because it does that, and it's just extraordinary, just absolutely extraordinary. Popping, banging, cracking, making all sorts of absolutely bizarre sounds, but so cool sounds. Anyway, I guess we'd better continue, get back towards base, and have a bit of a wrap up. Here we are, back in the garage. I was listening to it probably banging away even at idle. That's an extraordinary sound, so the sound of silence. Now that was an experience, and the way this car, even at idle, is just popping and banging and burbling and making all sorts of crazy sounds is unlike anything else. But to drive it and to have roads that really welcomed driving and enjoying the car a little bit more than perhaps I might have done in the past, to be able to get the foot on the throttle. And it's interesting, obviously, how heavily turbocharged it is when you start moving in, say, second or third gear, and you're waiting for it, and then you get everything. It gives you a really unique experience. And when you think about the way these values have gone, it makes sense, because nothing else like this really exists or ever will exist again. And to have an F40 in a collection is obviously a really important car. It's a really iconic car. It's a really representative car of an era, part of the Ferrari 5, or soon to be Ferrari 6, let's say, as well. And, you know, this is couple of $1 million now. Perfect examples, maybe 3, but it's not going to be long until they're 5. It's not going to be long at all until they're 5. As I mentioned, it is still the case that for me, I would take the F50. The F50 was my poster car. They are already $5 million, which is also a little bit bonkers to think about, but there are so few, 349 cars in total, so it's a slightly different thing compared to the F40s. But these are a car that are appealing to so many collectors now. It's a car that has so much to offer in its appearance, in its driving style, in its feel, and that's why the values are very much on this trajectory straight up, and will continue to do so, I believe, because, you know, there won't be any more of them. There are more and more people that want them, and there won't be any more of these in terms of the cars and what they offer. A really awesome car to be here as part of 458 Destroyer's collection, fitting in very nicely with all of the others, the Ferraris just along this side and everything else that's here as well. And to be honest, that was a mega drive. That was a mega drive. While I've been behind the wheel of the F40s before, I think I've always been a bit more cautious. Not to say that I wasn't cautious driving in this, but a bit more cautious of the car and not really on the right roads to enjoy it to the maximum. Whereas here, to have the curves, to have the opportunity to slow down, get back on the power, etc., gives a complete eye-opener as to what this is all about. It's a really, really awesome driving experience. But you probably didn't need me to tell you that. Anyway, it is a huge thanks to 458 Destroyer. Do go follow his page if you aren't already, for the opportunity to pop down, to drive this, and to experience the F40 on those kind of roads. What a day. That's it for now though. Thank you very much for watching as always, guys. I appreciate your support an awful lot, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.